Dave Scott with Lori from Purposefully Unplugged. Today's topic is communication. This is one Lori and I have been talking about for a while, and I want to thank Lori first off because she inspired a story that I wrote in the April Hub when we last talked about communication, and I thought that was kind of a great way to start the show today, a little lead in, because you taught me so much, and I got to appreciate that. So let's share with the audience. Define communication for me, and I think we're going to talk about this in relationships, correct?
Absolutely. So communication, Dave, is considering both the sender message and the receiver's reception. And that's usually is when communication starts to break down. The key here is that we have to listen with the intent to understand. Don't listen with the intent to judge or reply.
I like that, to understand, because I think sometimes in conversations, people turn it off. They've already got the response built in, right? Like they don't hear what you're saying. In a long-term relationship, that's got to happen frequently, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes in long-term relationships, we get in patterns where we already think we know what the person needs. We think we know what the person wants. And to make this faster, quicker, and simpler, let's just go to the solution. Where sometimes our narrative changes. We need those closest to us to hear when our narrative changes.
Can you give me an example?
It might be an example about how we interact with another friend, and the person you're talking to makes the assumption of the way the conversation ended last time. Oh, well, you just need to do this. It'll all be fine. So sometimes we get right to the solution. We offer the solution when really the person just needs us to listen and to hear and to respect and to take the time to be present with you.
Yeah, there's a big value in just listening, isn't there? That's a major component of communication that a lot of us have. We kind of get stuck and don't do it properly, do we? Mm-hmm.
And part of that could be our society's changing. We want fast solutions, immediate results. We're using TikTok and texting. So our communication pattern is changing. But really in face-to-face communication, it's really best if we can slow it down, focus, and listen.
And just body language. Like, I think if you're not having that one-on-one communication, sometimes you lose that. You don't see the body language. Maybe there's something going on in the background that's a distraction. There's so many other aspects to it. And communication, and I've mentioned this to you before. Sometimes I feel like I used to do that quite a bit. It's like I would get that thought in my head. So I was trying to respond before the person was finished. I wasn't hearing what they were saying. And now I get that. And sometimes I'll feel that somebody's not listening to what I'm saying. So when that happens in a relationship, how do you break that down? Like if it's a friend, that maybe just seems to be out there a little bit, you're not hearing me. Like what's some solutions
One
you can
big
do?
key is just to be present yourself, like slow down your own breathing, be present yourself so you can hear. And you mentioned body language. That's interesting because there's a communication triangle. It suggests that 60% of any communication is consisting of the facial and body language. 33% is the tone, volume, and cadence of our voice. That only leaves 7%, Dave, the actual words that we say.
Really? Oh, man. See, that's a whole different perspective, right? Like when you think about that, I didn't really realize that. And you've said that to me before, but it really sunk in that time. It's like, wow, it's that aspect of what's around you at the time when you're having that communication, as far as the signals you're sending off, correct?
Mm-hmm. Our signals, their signals. So it's really good. I mean, I think I've talked in other sessions we've had, just slow down, be present, breathe. And I think in lots of parts of our world, we're just not doing that well. We're trying to do more, faster, and more efficiently. But in communication, we really have to slow it down. It's a crock-pot kind of discussion, Dave.
Would you recommend putting aside all the electronics when you're trying to have that conversation with someone?
Absolutely. We should put aside our electronics when we're face-to-face with someone. And when I'm working with a communication pattern structure like that, I suggest even 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes a day. Put the phones away and turn them off. No TVs. Start with 5 minutes. Because if we haven't been spending a lot of time with our kids or our partners or our best friends, we really need to slow it down and then kind of build up our ability, because we're going to be tense we're not used to slowing down, unplugging, and focusing.
That's a great point you brought up there. And that's something we didn't talk about was your kids and my kids are growing up, but that communication now, because they're, maybe they're a little farther away, it becomes harder and harder. And it becomes more as we age. I want that conversation, right? I'm sure you do too. So let's talk about that for a sec, because now all of a sudden you're dealing with an adult who is your child. So now you've got to look at different ways to communicate with them. You don't treat them like a child anymore. You've got to treat them as an adult. Is that a communication barrier that a lot of parents run into?
It could be, but that'd be a topic of a whole session, I think,
Yeah.
Dave.
Sorry, there I go again.
I mean, the way I look at it is often I'll say to my own kids, this adulting thing is pretty tough, isn't it? And it's just that understanding. And, really, that's what I have a lot of clients tell me too, that when they're in session with me, it's the first time they're really being heard. So that's
wow.
one of the keys to coming to therapy or counseling, is that your story, your narrative is being heard by someone who isn't a family member, who isn't a best friend, or who isn't a partner.
Yeah, I never even thought, because then you're taking that onus off everyone else, right? It's you confiding in someone that, maybe there's something that's bothering you that doesn't help create the positive communication you want to have with someone else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that must be.
And
Go ahead.
therapy and counseling offers the opportunity just to think about things from a different way, explore things from a different way, where there is no judgment, there is no intent. It's just a conversation to kind of explore and deepen, so that a client can then go back to their major relationships and frame things in a different way.
Do we all get stuck in that tunnel? Like when we're we can't, like what you just said is so appropriate, because you're trying to expand that horizon. But in relationships, with communication, we get stuck in that tunnel, don't we? In a lot of cases.
Sometimes we get stuck in a tunnel, for sure.
Yeah.
Some people are stuck in tunnels. And that's frustrating when you're stuck in a tunnel with someone. That's that interactive sender-receiver part of communication, that someone else in your life might be stuck, but that means you are stuck too. So talking those things through, building some strategies around communication, and just starting in the therapeutic environment is a good place to start and expand those ideas.
And now, when you talk about people and they're responding before the person finishes their thought, is there an interest? Like, let me frame this differently. So, at the end of the day, at the end of the work day, Monica and I always have conversations about our days, and that's really important for each of us to have those conversations, to understand what the other person went through, how her day went at work and how my day went at work. That to me is kind of where we sort of have that great understanding. We need to sort of let each other hear what we did. And I find that's really important to pay attention at that time, because I want to hear. But sometimes I see people that don't, like they get lost, right, in their thoughts. And it's just, yep. You know what I mean? So how do you engage that? How do people keep re-engaging it? We've been lucky. I mean, we've always I'm interested in her work. She's interested in mine. So it works out really well. But how do people in a relationship gauge that?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a lot of complications there. Consider shift work. Consider external responsibilities outside the home. Consider illness and disease, and if you're helping someone or being a caregiver. And then think of your own mental health and what position you are in before you approach a conversation. So there's a multitude of complications around that, Dave. There's lots of people that have to actually schedule time. Like Saturday morning is our good time to have a coffee and talk about this. It's not Tuesday when I'm coming and you're going and we're both on opposite shifts.
Yeah, that's for sure. In my world, I guess I didn't think of it that way, because we have that opportunity to have a sit down and chat every evening, and put on a record and just talk about what life went like that day. Record, eh? Who listens to those anymore? Anyway, that's another story. but I think that's the gist of it too. You communication to me is the critical point for marriage, for any relationship that you have, because if you can't do that, it's not going to work.
Mm-hmm. And I work with lots of people who may not have been able to do that, but there are strategies to kind of soften those edges and to develop more skill sets and to just come back to that kind of a communication pattern. So even if someone's communication pattern is there are repair options.
communication, this is a weird question, but I think communication grows in a relationship as the relationship grows. So, though those early days you're finding out about each other, but as your life together grows, your communication grows because you see, maybe I'm off base on this, you can tell me, but I think then you see different options to have that communication, right? Understanding the other person better.
You can. And certainly you're in a relationship where the opportunity is there to do that.
Yeah.
Some relationships aren't in that structure or have that availability. So sometimes communication comes down to, was the hydro bill paid? That the milk
Yes.
is expired. Who signed the trip for the kids to go skiing? I mean, so sometimes it does become mechanical, but that's where I'm saying there's always repair options, and couples have that option. Likewise, repair options between communication between a child and an adult and a parent. Likewise, communication repair between friends, if that's needed as well. There are always repair options, and just getting some guidance or assistance to move through that is often helpful.
Can you share with us, again, some examples of problems that cause communication breakdown, like outside the realm?
Well, if you look at, let's talk about a marital relationship or a spousal relationship, the top three are usually intimacy, finances, and family members.
Okay. So, and do you find that when they're coming to you, they're trying to figure out a way to cope with those in the relationship, or understand them better? Like, what? I guess it's the same question, but what service can you say to them that I can help you with when they bring those three? Those are big items to the table.
Finances and intimacy are usually the top two, and they're usually entwined somehow. So, Dave, really, this depends. I mean, if a couple's coming, then we can work on that live together, and we can build strategies live together. If I'm working with one individual who's experiencing this in their relationship, then we can only work from that individual perspective. What can you do? How can you see this differently? How can you expand kind of your listening and your ability to be present?
Is there, and I know you don't really, this is not an advice offering show, but is there anything you could do on your own? That you would say to somebody to, like you said, the 5 minutes? Is that a prime example of something they could start to do on their own, to just to see?
Anybody can do that. So just 5 minutes where you're unplugged, where you have no kind of distraction, where you can just focus on your own body, your own breathing, being present, to then have a conversation. And then remember, though, the other person has to be in the same space. Communication is both that sender and receiver. So there's some gentleness here and some exploration, but you can start that for yourself and just be open and let the other person know that that's what you're attempting to do. Because again, we have to communicate that to them, or they'll have no idea what our interest or intent is. It's really complicated whenever you look at when there's been a communication breakdown and starting that repair.
When you look at the amount of divorces in the country, I'm just curious now. I wonder how much is based on lack of communication, eh?
It's hard to say, because
but I mean, it's got to be up there, eh?
Our lives are so entwined. There's several things. And we
Right.
don't ever usually think of communication as the primary. It is the financial concerns or the intimacy or the emotional detachment. We don't necessarily think all the way back to how the deterioration started. So
Gotcha.
it's really hard to say, Dave. And often it's very complicated, and it just takes time to unravel. Lots of clients think of this as a ball of yarn that's all tied up. Unraveling, untwining, and just getting to some of the root.
So yeah, still waters run deep, right? It could go back a long ways with folks, and probably unburying that can bring up other issues, but at least it's a start to revamp your communication skills. Where can people find you?
The website is purposefullyunplugged.com. Phone is always easy, 226-934-7425. And email is Lori@purposefullyunplugged.com.
And just quickly, an overview, you take on all different types of clients. Can you give us some ideas of some of the folks that you're able to help?
So I enjoy working with young people between the age of 10 and kind of to adulthood, early adults for sure, depending on how things are going for someone. And I do work with adults individually or in a couples setting.
And communication great topic today. I hope we communicated well today, that we were able to help some folks somewhere along the road just, break down those barriers and get back to communicating with their partners in their relationship. And we did discuss some other topics for next time. So I look forward to seeing you next month. And once again, thanks. This is a show you and I have wanted to do for a long time. And I think we could probably add another part to this, because there's so many other questions I'd like to share, but I know you got to get to work, and so do I. Have a great day, Lori.
Take care.